Hello again everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today we're looking at a brand new airplane to the sim. This is Local Legend 19, the Focke-Wulf FW200 Condor. We're currently on the ground here in Berlin. Let's just take a look around the outside of this real quick. This was done by Any Builds, or Oliver Moser, I believe, had a hand in this as well. Maybe familiar with the Ju-52 that he did quite some time ago. But overall, just taking a look at this exterior model, the exterior model is very good. And we'll get into why that is here in a little bit. And we'll also start talking about the history and hopefully the correct operation of this airplane. I've only had time for a short flight, but we'll try to show you how it's done. Like I said, we're on the ground here in Berlin. Got beautiful weather here this morning. And we're going to take a short flight down to Dresden. It's a little over a half-hour flight. So without further ado, let's climb aboard. We'll continue kind of looking around the airplane and walking through engine start, and then we'll head down to Dresden. So here we are in the cockpit of our FW200, and just my first initial impressions is it's not bad. The modeling is good. The texturing does feel a little bit flat in certain areas, but overall I'd say it's pretty good. And I'm actually going to go ahead and turn off the tooltips here, because I was playing around with that earlier. I don't know German, so I'm having to fumble my way through it, but we're going to try to get this thing going. So as we look around here, we've got your standard flight gauges. They're not laid out in the correct order that we're used to, of course, but they're all still there. So we've got a heading indicator, altimeter here. This, I believe, goes up to 1,000 meters, and then this one goes up higher, up to 10,000 meters. Airspeed indicators here, turn indicator, climb rate. This is, I believe, a VOR, is what it's tied to. It's actually originally for a Lorenz beam system. Of course, attitude indicator, voltage, autopilot units here. I believe this is your instrument lighting. And then down here we have anti-ice and some more light rheostats. Coming into the middle here, we've got our RPM gauges for all four engines, manifold pressure. I believe that's temperature there. Yes, there's our temperature. And then we have oil pressure and fuel pressure on these. The yellow is your fuel pressure, red or orange color there is our oil pressure for all four engines across the bottom. Coming down to our center pedestal, magnetos are here, landing light switches here. This is your start selector. And you got, of course, throttles and the mixtures here tied in. Yep, their mixtures are tied in right there with the throttle quadrant. Propeller levers are down here. Landing gear flap lever. Fuel shutoffs for all four of your engines are here. Parking brake, of course. These red knobs are your fire extinguishers. And then behind this panel, we have a full fuel dumping panel, which actually does work. You can select these different tanks. There are 13 fuel tanks on the Condor, and we'll get into those here in just a second as we get ready to start. These two levers here are fuel selector levers, which we're going to use here momentarily. You've got COM and nav radio dials here for convenience, but your radio operated panel is actually behind us here, behind this bulkhead. We'll get to that here in a second. Co-pilot side, you get some more things here. You've got, I believe all these are your anti-ice for your engines, carb heat. You've got nav lights and anti-collision lights down here. Cow flaps are here. And then behind the yoke here is battery and generator switches. You've got your fuel tank gauges here. So you select each fuel tank with your rotary knobs below them. It'll indicate the fuel quantities. This is your cylinder head temperature selector. So you can see cylinder head temperature for engine 1, 2, 3, and 4, and all the other standard gauges that are mirrored on the pilot side. Down here, this is your couple fuel tank switches, and this is a switch to open the door in the back. And this here is your fuel tank selector board, if you will. We have a manual fuel pump lever here, which doesn't actually appear to build any pressure. These 4 switches are your fuselage fuel pumps for the tanks that are in the fuselage. According to the manual, there are, as I said, 13 fuel tanks. I think it's 5 in the fuselage and 4 in the wings. So each engine has 3 tanks it can draw from, and then there's a 13th final tank that all 4 engines can draw from at the same time. And there is no cross-feed provisions, unlike most multi-fuel tank aircraft, which I find a bit odd, but that's, I believe that's the way the actual aircraft was. So the fuel system's a little complicated on the Condor, but the way we have it set right now, you'll see, I believe this is indicating the engines up here on this top side, and your fuel tanks are listed down here. So as we have it right now, you can see our little lines there. We have it linked to the tank and then flowing through here. This, if you change this like this, it has something to do with helping with fluctuation in fuel pressure, which I haven't messed with much yet, but that is what that is for. And then of course you have your fuselage tank number 5 here for that. So let's see if we can stroll around the airplane a little bit here. So if we come back here, should be able to open this door here. It'll let me. There it goes that way. Okay. Here's our passenger cabin. Take a look around in here. This is what I assume would be first class. You have a partition here. The Condor is set up to carry 26 passengers in these 2 compartments. Quite nice modeling in my opinion. You got your little nice touch of some baggage up there in the luggage compartment. Keep strolling back here to the rear of the airplane. There's our main door that we open with the switch on the side panel. Open this door, stroll back here. This is our baggage compartment. You see we got some cargo back here. Go back up here to the front. We'll check this door here because there is, as you can see my camera fading through the door, there's the bathroom modeled actually in here. It's kind of a nice feature. As I said, the modeling overall is pretty good. So let's go ahead and shut all this up, get back up to the cockpit, and actually fly this thing, because that's what we're here to do. It's nice to look at, but we're here to fly. Tricky to close the doors in this thing. Alright, back up to the front we go. Like how that was quick. Oh, I suppose I should have showed you as well. Right here is your radio panel. So you have your ADF, your nav and comm radios here, as well as your transponder here in the back, and your notes and notebook is what I assume that translates to. So let's get this airplane started. It isn't the most complicated, but it's not the simplest either. So we'll go ahead and open our cowl flaps here. And we'll turn our battery on. I'm going to go ahead and take generators on too, so don't forget about them later. And we'll turn our fuel on. Make sure our propellers are full forward. Mixtures are full rich. We'll select this. Up to start. And then we'll go back here and we'll turn on these fuel pumps. For start, you're supposed to start on the fuselage tanks. So those are the fuselage fuel pumps, which again, don't seem to do anything, but for the sake of doing it, we're gonna turn those on. I take the beacon on, take the nav lights on, and the strobes, which is all three of these switches there, as you saw. So then start's pretty straightforward. We flip this cover back, and there's our start handle there. We'll select engine 4, and we'll start at 4, 3, 2, 1. And I do quite like the start sounds in this airplane, but there is one oddity that I'll show you. So typically in the older airplanes, you roll the engine over and then kick the mags on. But if we do that, notice what happens. So we'll pull the starter. You hear it try to start before we even threw the mags in. But despite the sounds being off, I do quite like the way it sounds when it starts. We'll just idle up engine 4 here to about 800 RPM for warm-up. Keep it below 1,000. Throttles up for every other engine, the same amount. Go. So as you see, good oil pressure, good fuel pressure there on the start. And we'll go to engine 3. So yeah, like I said, other than the timing that's a little off, I like the way it sounds when it starts. Now these are BMW 132 radials. You see our attitude indicator coming alive. That indicates our vacuum pump is on engine number 2. And engine 1. There we go. All 4 engines are running. Good oil pressure, good fuel pressure on all of them. Turn that off. Let our engine warm up. So these are, as I said, BMW 132's 9-cylinder radials. Right around 800 horsepower, I believe. And if I remember what I was reading, I believe this is very similar to a Pratt & Whitney Hornet, at least in the earlier versions of the Condor. It's a license-built version of the Hornet. The later models, like the C models, had Brahmo 323R2s with 1,085 horsepower. But don't think this is based on a C3. I think this was based on a D model, I want to say. It's got the 3-bladed props as opposed to the older ones having 2-bladed props, the first versions. So as we're waiting on it to warm up, which they're actually warming up pretty quick. The system depth on this is pretty basic, as with most local legends, but it gives you enough of a feel of what it would have been like to fly this airplane back in the 30s. The Condor was the unfortunate things that happened where it was a good airplane that was designed at the wrong time. We'll put it that way. Because the Condor was first flown in 1937. And, of course, shortly after that, World War II broke out with Germany invading Poland. And the FW200s were all pretty much converted to military standard. They had gondolas added below them, with gun mounts, and they were fitted with bomb racks and anything else that they could come up with to turn them into military aircraft. But before the war, this was designed to be a airplane that could fly across the Atlantic, which it did do in record time. One of them was fitted with extra fuel tanks and flew nonstop from Berlin to Floyd Bennett Field in New York in 1938. It did it in just under 25 hours. I believe it was 24 hours and 56 minutes on the way there, and then going back to Berlin, it took a little over 19 hours, which was a record at the time. So we're pretty warmed up here. We'll go ahead and take our parking brake off. Sails around here. An interesting thing about this particular model is, and the reason why I say it's so good, is because Microsoft actually went to the only existing Condor and scanned every inch of this airplane to make the 3D model. Which, if that's not dedication, I don't know what is. And the story of that one remaining Condor is quite impressive, and if I remember to do it, I will link the short video that describes the process that Microsoft went to, and it's talking to the people that restored, or one of the volunteers that restored that Condor. It took them over 20 years to restore this airplane, which they pulled off the bottom of a lake. And if you go and look at that video and see the condition that airplane was in when they pulled it off the bottom of the lake and what they've done with it, it's remarkable what they've done. It was a mess. You're sitting on the bottom of that lake for several years. I think they did it in the 90s. I think 99 was when they pulled it out. And it actually fell apart when they pulled it out of the lake. It fell into tons of pieces and made a disaster of it. But they put it back together, and that's not flying, it is static display. But still remarkable nonetheless. I'm going to go ahead and run up my engines here. Do my outboard engines first. Come up to 1500 RPM. Be there. And cycle my props. Good cycle there. We'll run up to, which are actually kind of already there. So it's really weird for me to get used to this airplane being everything in metric. But if you look at your manifold pressure, 1 atmosphere is 29.92 inches of mercury, which is typically what you want to do a mag check at. Or around 30, I guess, is field elevation. So we do get a drop on the mags there. Just slight, which is what you want to see in the real world. Those are good, and then we'll do the inner 2 engines. Okay, so that's all 4 of our engines run up. So we'll go ahead and taxi out to our runway here and get going. This takeoff speed is supposed to be 150 kilometers an hour. One thing we want to do before we take off, though, we want to make sure we switch to those tanks, I believe. Taking off at 2.5 left. take those fuel tanks, and then we'll look over to our co-pilot side here and kick on these takeoff and landing pumps. Turn these off. Right, we're lined up, ready for takeoff. We'll go full power. Tail should come up on its own. There it goes. 100, airspeed's alive, engines are good. 150. Away she goes. Tap brakes, pause brake gear coming up. We're at 200. We're gonna try to climb at about 220. It's actually kind of hard spot on there. There we go. I'm gonna go ahead and pull my power a little bit since we're up pretty good. Pull back to about 2100 and pull back to 1.4 atmosphere. Should be about 40. I'm guessing. I'm trying to convert in my head. And we'll turn to the south toward Dresden. I thought I didn't like the way it flew at first when I first flew it, but it actually flies pretty good. It was very smooth. And it's not as sensitive in pitch as I thought initially, which is always good to see. It does climb like a rocket, that's for sure. Which I don't know how accurate that is, but I'll take it. It's better for it to climb good than not at all. So like I said earlier, the Condor was designed for those long hops across the Atlantic, because at the time there wasn't any other airplane that could do that. You had seaplanes, of course. You had some things like the Martin 130s and the Sikorsky S-42, and then of course the Boeing 314 came in about the same time as the Condor. But you didn't really have anything that was a land-based plane that could fly that far. So Kurt Tank at Focke-Wulf approached a gentleman at Deutsche Lufthansa and said, "Hey, I have this idea for an airplane." So they decided to build it. And it did, like I said earlier, it set that record flying across the pond. In just under 25 hours. Had never been done non-stop before. Every other airplane had to stop for fuel somewhere. But not the Condor. And the Condor has an interesting design feature on the wings. If you can notice, I'll show it to you here in a second. That is the one thing that I don't like about the models, these thick black prop discs. They're kind of strange looking, but anyways. The wing design on the Condor is what's called a high aspect ratio wing. And you can think of things such as a glider or the U-2 spy plane made by Lockheed. Those also have high aspect ratio wings. They're long, thin wings, which is usually better for efficiency in cruise, like long distance flying. And that's what the Condor is designed with. Pull power back to cruise here, about 1800. And we'll go for about 0.8 on the manifold pressure. And you should be cruising just over 300 kilometers an hour, right around like 320 or so. We'll see what happens. But it does seem to trim out pretty nice once I get it sorted here. There we go. I'm trimmed, hands off. Just a little bit down there. And of course we do have an autopilot that we could use, which I may do now. Turn that on, and you should have set our heading here. Go the other way. There's our heading 150, and we've got. It does have a GPS somewheres. Now one thing you gotta watch on this autopilot is see when we hit this, which is altitude hold, it tried to drop us down. It's got this orange pointer on the vertical speed. Just dial that up to 0. Probably should have done that before, but otherwise it'll try to put you in a dive. There's one oddity that I've noticed with it. So yeah, when this came out, it was the only thing that could go across the Atlantic until the Stratoliner came out in 1940, and then the DC-4 in 42. And then those could also make that trip across the Atlantic. But the benefit of the Stratoliner, of course, being in a pressurized cabin, it could fly up higher than the Condor. The Condor was designed to fly at around 10,000 feet. As it didn't have a pressurized cabin. DC-4 also was not pressurized, but still had that range that it could take advantage of. And at the time when it came out, it was ahead of its time. It was the most modern airliner at the time. But of course it was rendered obsolete very quickly, as things in that era often were. And during the war, it also had issues of being outdated. At first, it was considered a terror to shipping, but then later it was beat by hurricanes that were launched from catapults on ships and things of that nature that just rendered it pretty much useless to its role, and it was relegated to transport duties. They had a lot of issues with them breaking in half on landing. And that's, usually not something that's good for an airplane to do. Interesting little piece that this airplane probably wouldn't have been a military aircraft unless the Japanese requested it, which they did before the war broke out. But the one that was slated to go to them, of course, ended up going back to Germany because Germany needed it before Japan did. So Japan never got their patrol aircraft in the form of the Condor. So if we go outside, take a look at that wing I was talking about, you can see it's much longer and thinner than aircraft at that time. You think of the DC-3 as a much fatter wing. But overall, she looks good and flies good. We'll cruise on down here to Dresden, and I'll get back with you as we get ready to start our descent. Alright, so welcome back. We are getting to the point where I want to descend. We're about 40 miles out now. So I'm going to go ahead and pull my power back some, so we can start slowing down. And one thing I did want to show you, just in case you wanted to use it, I don't personally use it, as I like the old school way, but there is, if we hit this switch here, a tablet. Look at that. So we got here, we've got our airspeed, currently doing 174 knots, our altitude, got our weather information, pressure, wind direction, and so on. We also have our fuel and weight info, so you can see how much fuel you got on board, what your payload is. And then if you hit right here, you've got your standard GPS map, if you so choose to use it. And you can stow it back away if you don't want to use it. And it will follow a GPS course with the autopilot, or at least I assume it will. I haven't tried it personally, but there is a GPS button right there on your autopilot, so it should follow that course on your GPS if you so choose to use that. Power back here. It's gonna be hard for me to tell where we're at on power because it's all in metric and I don't know metric very well. We'll learn. Take our altitude hold off, and I'm going to dial in a descent. Vertical speed. And then hit that again, and it should take us down. I gotta remember to close those cow flaps up, I guess. Got to do that in cruise. We gotta make sure we switch back to our landing tanks before we touch down. It's kind of, the fuel system is the weirdest thing about this airplane. It's gonna take me some time to fully understand it, but 13 tanks is a lot to deal with. But overall, I do like this plane. I was not expecting to like it, but it checks all the boxes for me. It's got radial engines. It's a vintage airliner. I'm a happy camper. And for the price, it's definitely worth it. So if you're like me and you're crazy about vintage airliners, pick this one up. It's got some things that could be improved upon, as with most local legends when they first come out, but it is a fun airplane to fly. It's got a nice view too. Look at that. Alright, still coming down nicely here. We're at about 1,000 meters, looks like. We want to be down around 600 for pattern altitude at Dresden. Picking up quite a bit of speed, unfortunately, but it'll be fine. It'll be alright. Should be seeing Dresden soon. This is only my second time flying in Germany, so don't know the lay of the land very well. I do like the view out of this airplane, though. It's very panoramic. Down 700 meters. Looks like Dresden right there, right off our nose. Take the autopilot out. And I'm gonna go ahead and fly a big wide circuit here. Try to get ourselves slowed down. We're about 650 meters, which is okay. It's a little high, but man, our speed's bleeding off a little bit. Should be runway 22 and runway 4. Yep, runway 22. That is Dresden, confirmed. I'm gonna go ahead and switch my fuel tanks here. Sure. We're running about square on our power as far as 1800 and 18 inches, which that's 0.8, but that's besides the point. It does not slow down very easy, finding out. See what we can do, though. We're just making this up as we go. And normally I dig out the flight manual and read through how you're actually supposed to fly this airplane, but I believe most of the flight manuals are in German for this airplane, and it's a time-consuming process to try and decipher that for myself. So we're just gonna fly by the seat of our pants, just like the old guys did. Looking okay. Make sure our mixture is full rich. And landing lights can come on. Confirm I did switch fuel tanks. Fuel pumps are on. Good. Good, 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 good. Bring the landing gear down. Do that now. That should bleed off some speed pretty well. 250 kilometers an hour. And we got 1-notch flaps in. Pull the power back just a little more. And we'll start our slow descent. Go ahead and make my base turn here. Like I said, I'm just kind of flying this by the seat of my pants here, figuring out what she does. Just not the easiest thing to do when you can't feel what the airplane's doing. I'll go ahead and take landing flaps out here. Yeah, we should be alright. Down to 200 kilometers an hour. She feels okay, looks okay, a little high maybe. But turn final. And we'll wait actually a little bit, it's a little too early. Keep coming down on the base leg here. Now we'll turn it. Happy to say we're lined up. A little low. According to the lights. There we go. Just keep that coming. A little trim. Coming over the trees here. Pull power back, full RPM on our props, just in case we have to go around. Looking good. A little bit of left rudder there. A little bit of aileron. Nice touchdown. Keep her on the runway. There's the tail wheel coming down. Well, you really can't see anything over the nose of this airplane. I probably could have braked and made it to that taxiway, but it's okay. Just keep her rolling. We're on the ground. We'll open the cow flaps here. There we go. We'll take this taxiway. We don't have to smoke our brakes trying to make it. Alright, clear the runway, down the ground, everything is wonderful. Take the flaps up, and we'll switch back. to start tanks, I believe is what you do. Let's see, we want to go, let's just go over here. We don't want a jet bridge. We'll taxi over here. This is probably not where I'm supposed to park, but it's convenient, so we're going to take it. Alright, parking brake on. And I'm going to go ahead and put a mixture. Shut off all 4 engines at the same time. Shut everything else off here. Leave that alone. And shut off our lights. Beautiful. Well, that is it for this flight. We're shut down, parked up. I hope you enjoyed our little jaunt through Germany and jaunt through history there. As far as the Condor goes, my overall thoughts are this is a good visual representation of the FW200 Condor. It's not the most in-depth systems-wise, but it was still a joy to fly. I did have a lot of fun flying this the first time on a long flight, or longer flight, I should say. It really wasn't that long, but overall, it's got a lot of potential. There's a few things that I'd like to see fixed, such as the prop discs and perhaps the timing on the start sounds. Even though they aren't quite good, I do enjoy those start sounds a lot. But if you're interested in vintage airliners, radial engines, anything from the 30s, this checks all those boxes for me personally, and I definitely recommend picking up this aircraft. If you did enjoy this video and you stuck around this long, consider giving it a like, perhaps subscribing to the channel. I always try to do some historical flights and take a dive back into history and learn a little bit more about the way things were done back in the day as far as aviation is concerned. So I hope wherever you are, you're having a good day. And without further ado, we'll close out this video and we'll see you next time.